back for my August wrap up. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books. That is actually really good for me. I don't usually read 9 books in a month. I'm usually around like the 6 to maybe 7 roughly, but I think I've done really well this month. I don't know what it is, but I really was enjoying most of these books I was reading, and I also did one reread. I have one DNF here. We'll quickly jump in with the first book of the month, as I always do. I go from start to finish of the month. Starting off the month, I did a reread for Heartless by Elsie Silver. I ended the month with a couple books that I didn't enjoy previously in July, so I was just in the mood for something that felt like home, you know? Like I just needed something that I knew was gonna feed me the way that I needed to be fed, and this absolutely ate. I was so happy that I ended up rereading this, and this was my first reread for the entire Chestnut Springs series since, you know, each book has consecutively come out, and I would say that this is still a 5-star read for me, and possibly even bordering on a 6-star read. Not that I really give 6 stars out. This would be a 6-star read if I usually give them 6 stars. I don't know what it is. I think it's the nostalgia of like being back in the Chestnut Springs series. This was the first book of Elsie Silver's that I ever read. Skipped Flawless, went straight to Heartless because of a recommendation that I got. Then I went back to Flawless and then continued on with the series, and then went to her other series, what's the other one again? The Ranch series. I ended up reading that one. I've forgotten the name. Anyway, I read her other series and I really enjoyed that, but if you are looking for a book to get into Elsie Silver, it doesn't matter which one you read or start with because they are interconnected standalone, so you can read this completely on its own. Probably is best to read in order, but if you're like me and you're not really too bothered, then I highly suggest picking this one up because, oh my god, it's just so deliciously good. And it really solidified that Daddy Kate is like my man in this series. And for anyone who's like a Vanderpump Rules fan, he's the #1 guy in the group. I would say Theo is #2. But he is number one guy in the group. Anyway, 6 stars, highly recommend if you've not already read the series. So glad I started the month off with this because I think it just like added to the experience that was about to come. The next 3 books were part of a reading vlog that I had where the content creators chose my reads for the week. If you've not already watched that, I will link it above. But I did read Play Along. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. This one was recommended to me by Sarah. Actually, no, I gave this 4.25. I remember initially it was 4.5 and then I dropped it down to 4.25. The reason being I don't think this is my favorite couple of the series. It was cute and it had all of the like good banter moments and the yearning, like a man who truly is obsessed with his woman. If you love a man who is like that, very good communicator, will tell you how it is sort of man. If you've not already read this series, you need to get into the Windy City series. Like this is probably my favorite series at the moment, I would say. Liz Tomford with every single book is just getting better and better. I would say that this is still like a really great book. Not my favorite of the series. I am definitely a Caught Up fan. Any of the Rhodes brothers will do for me. I will take both of them. That sounded really wrong, but I will. Kennedy and Isaiah have a one night out in Las Vegas. They end up getting married. She works for the team, so it's a little bit of an issue with her work and like her job role, especially to do with her boss who's a bit misogynistic. They have to lie about being married to try and save her job. Then obviously there are moments throughout the team where they have a bit of forced proximity and they have to actually pretend to be together around everyone so that she doesn't lose her job. Isaiah has been obsessing over Kennedy since the day he saw her, and then getting to know these characters on a different level just made it so much more better. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait for the final book in the series. I think this is going to be a series that everyone will never forget. It's truly that good. If you've not started it, please start the Windy City series. Everyone might not like the first book. It's a little bit of a hit and miss with some people, but books 2, 3, and 4, you'll be good. And I forgot to mention that if you are an acts of service girly, read it. Oh shit, just dropped the book. Next we have Talking at Night by Claire Daly. This was in the same vlog. Tammy was the one that suggested me to read this one. She hadn't read it herself. I liked this book. Thinking back on it, I don't really like the female main character. I didn't like the coming of age, lots of tragedy after tragedy after tragedy type of story, especially because I felt like the tragedies were very repetitive. I didn't enjoy the story myself that much, but I did like it. But I think it's because I didn't connect with the female main character. Like, some of her decision making I was physically feeling sick and angry over, but I'm also like, maybe it was a good book in the way that it evoked like such reactions out of me, because usually a book like I'm like, oh yeah, da 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 da, but this was truly like making me quite frustrated, and it was very interesting to read along with the story. What I did like about this book though was the mental health representation, as well as also just good representation for troubled relationships, whether that be with a friend or a family member or, you know, your actual relationship. This was very good at depicting quite a few different scenarios of having bad relationships with people. And this was also set in the 90s, so I did enjoy like the nostalgic feeling of like quite a few of the things that they were doing together. I don't know, that's what I was really enjoying the most. But what I did think that it was missing was that it was a lot of telling and not showing. So it was like just a lot of inner dialogue and a lot of just information fed to me rather than just reading about their relationship a bit more. We were sort of told what they were doing rather than just giving us the scene of what happened, and I would rather have read that than just, you know. I ended up giving this book a 3.75 stars. I really enjoyed it. I would still recommend it. It's not my most favorite book, but I would still say that a lot of people would love this. Now this is where we take a bit of a turn. And when I say turn, I mean I really despised this book when I was reading it. There was a lot of things that just really irritated me. Reckless by Lauren Roberts. I had this as one of my most anticipated reads for this month coming, or sorry, not month coming, the month just been. What I would say that really upset me the most was the writing. I think this needed more editing, maybe like a few more run-throughs. It really lacked a lot of things that I was expecting from the first book and then moving into this book. I didn't have a plot that was driving, that was keeping me really interested in the story, and also the characters, I felt like they just were not fleshed out enough. They just kept repeating the same thing to each other. Even their inner dialogue from chapter to chapter, when we kept switching POVs, they were saying the exact same thing, and I was getting really irritated with reading that. I wanted more progression in the story. But then another thing as well is I think that it was a bit too fast paced in the sense of a timeline. Timeline was very off from the last book, and then moving into this one with how quickly things evolved, with especially with such large events that happened at the end of Powerless, that I thought that maybe they would have given a little bit more of a time gap or time jump between how things have progressed. But I mean, I don't know. And like there was a lot of words within this book that were very repetitive. The word pretend, I mentioned it in the vlog. I did not want to hear that word ever again because it was literally in every single chapter. But yeah, it just felt like nothing was happening. And I know a lot of people have said that this is just like an in-between book for the final book, but I felt like there could have been something more. Maybe not to do with the plot, but maybe just with the writing. Like I would have been happy to continue reading this if it didn't feel like I was just getting fed the same thing over and over again. We could have had a little bit more enemies. We could have had a little bit more of just anything really. Yeah, 2 stars, not for me. Then this was also part of that same vlog. We have The Paradise Problem. This was recommended to me by Ellen to read. She hadn't read it herself either, so this was just like a brand new slate book. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this one was recommended to me by Sophie. The Paradise Problem, I enjoyed it. I think it was a good romance for what it was. I would recommend this to someone who loves the billionaire trope, because this is a marriage of convenience with a billionaire, but she doesn't know that he's a billionaire until one day he rocks up at her door saying, hey, I need you to come on this holiday with me and my family. They still think we're married, when actually the marriage is meant to end within a few months because of like some contract that they had in college. She ends up going on this holiday and it's just very extravagant, worlds apart from what she's used to, and obviously her family are a bit crazy. I gave this 3.75 stars. I really enjoyed it. I love a destination wedding as well. Like we had his sister getting married. However, there were quite a few things that were just a little bit cringe to me, especially with like the things that she was wearing. I really despise when an author describes what a character is wearing. I mentioned that in the vlog as well. I just really wish that they'd stop doing that because it really takes me out of the book and I just end up focusing on what they're wearing too much. And I know I shouldn't do it, but it's just in my head. The picture I've depicted is just being morphed into something completely different. Oh, and a bonus point for mentioning Harry Styles in the book. I always make note of that in my notes, so yeah, that's mentioned in here. Heartless also mentions Harry Styles for anyone who wants to know. Any Harry Styles fans. What I read in my getting through my TBR for the month, I ended up reading The Pairing. I DNF'd this book at about maybe like the 40-50% mark. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't like the relationship dynamic for this because it was 2 exes that ended up going on a wine tour over in Paris. Is it Paris, or I don't know, just through Europe in general, and they didn't know each other were going to be on this exact wine tour because they'd initially booked it when they were together. They broke up, they had to cancel the tour, but they ended up exchanging with the business to go at different times separately rather than together, without knowing that they were both going to end up on the same wine tour like 4 or 5 years later. So they haven't seen each other in quite a while. They're exes, and obviously it brings up a lot of things. But what they end up doing is they decide to make a competition with who can get with the most people on this holiday to prove a point, because they are a bit like fluid with their relationship dynamic when they were together. They were a bit almost polyamorous in a way, but not polyamorous. So I would have enjoyed it more if it was more of like a thing that they did together. But because they were doing it without each other and they were both getting really jealous, I just didn't like that dynamic, so I couldn't finish the book. I ended up DNFing. The Nightingale by Chris and Hannah, this was in the same vlog. This is a historical general fiction book. It's set in 1941 during World War II, or sorry, 1940 in France. And it goes through more of a story rather than the men on the front lines and the people who were fighting and nurses who were out there. This is more of the women at home and what the women at home went through. I know that sounds not the same, but oh my god, this book was literally life-changing. I am now the biggest Kristen Hannah fan. I've bought so many books of hers since reading this. I think I've bought about 4. I've got 1 already on my TBR and I found 3 more since making my TBR video because I'm just obsessed. Like, I need to read her entire backlist. She has such a captivating way of telling a story. I was just in love with how she's able to put a story together. And I know that these are quite sensitive topics that are in here, so definitely check up trigger warnings. There's some on-page stuff that's quite hard to, you know, take in. It's very real, it's very realistic to probably a lot of women's stories that they've gone through, especially during World War II and obviously through a lot of wars that have happened. And I really enjoyed like hearing like the heroic things that are more on the silent side that people don't really talk about. If you enjoy a historical general fiction book with a sprinkle of romance in there, but it's more to do with friendship, love, and trying to fight for your country and what you think is right, rather than, you know, doing what you're told. It's more thinking about your morals and what you believe in. You will love this. Truly a life-changing book. I need to continue reading all of her books. Mrs. Nash's Ashes by Sarah Adler. This is another sort of historical book as well because it does have a dual timeline. As you can tell by the title, we are following Mrs. Nash's story, who's passed away, and this is following during the 1940s and World War II as well. We don't get too much of Mrs. Nash's story, which I kind of was a bit upset about because I was really enjoying it and I wanted more of her story, especially with her romance with Elsie. I really wish we got to see more of them together. But the main romance is following Millicent and Hollis. They meet in an airport and unfortunately their flights get cancelled. They're both trying to get to Florida, and they decide to do a road trip together across the country. Obviously things happen and the time frame gets slowed down and they have to stay in different states along the way. I think it was cute, it was fun. It is a little bit similar to You With A View, so if you did like You With A View, I would say You With A View is better, but this is a very similar feeling if you're looking for something like that, especially to do with the road trip and also just dealing with grief. Yeah, it was an overall good romance and I enjoyed it. I just really wanted more of Mrs. Nash's story. I gave this 3.5 stars. If you love a grumpy sunshine type of dynamic, you'll definitely enjoy this book. Now, this final book I did finish on the 1st, but I haven't actually put up the vlog for it just yet, so it will be up very soon. Maybe before this video, it may not be. I'll link it if it's already up, but we have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. When I first started reading this book, I honestly thought this was going to be a 5-star read for me. I was getting such a 5-star feeling from it. Fortunately, I don't know what happened. It just it dragged out a little bit in some parts for me, and I think that's where I think I'm probably going to give it maybe a 4.25 rating, maybe a 4.5, but I'm feeling more of a 4.25. I'll put up on the screen what I end up deciding to rate it. This book has been always promoted to me as a book about gamers, which technically, yes, that is exactly what this is. You're following a group of friends who end up deciding to create a game, and you follow their relationships throughout a couple of decades, watching them fall in love in relationships, watching them fall out with each other. There's a lot of events that happen throughout all of these years and them building these games, but the true underlying theme is definitely friendship. So if you're looking for a character-driven book, you will love Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow if you've not already read it, because it is quite a popular book. I loved the platonic love that we got in this book. I think it really shows a good idea of what some friendships are like. But I think what I keep thinking of with this book, and I've mentioned it in the other vlog, is it just reminds me of A Little Life. I can't explain it other than a few things. The main character, Sam, in this reminds me so much of Jude, especially with the disabilities that they have. However, the way that they have an outlook on life is a bit different, but their work ethics are very similar. Their work is their life. It hasn't left my mind since I've thought this. And a lot of their stories are similar in some aspects, but not quite. A Little Life is way more trauma dumping than I've ever experienced in my life. This has some trauma in here, but I wouldn't say it's trauma dumping to the point of A Little Life. But if you enjoyed A Little Life because of the friendships and their struggles and everything that happens, and also just the main character Jude, and you've not read Tomorrow, you need to read it, because I just kept thinking, this is so similar, it's so different. Yeah, I don't know, I really enjoyed it, and I want to find some more books like this. So if anyone's got any more recommendations of similar books like this, please comment them down below, because I just love a book about friendship at the moment. It's really making me like analyze a lot of my friendships in real life and just think back on like, is that a friendship? Was that a friendship? Like, I don't know. I'm having one of those months. That was the final book for my wrap up. Out of all the books, I would say you guys have to read these 4 books. We have Play Along, Heartless, The Nightingale, and Tomorrow. They are the ones that I've given 4 stars or above. I'm obsessed. Like, I really enjoyed these books, and I think that they're worth your time if you do want to end up reading them. Anyway, I think I need to wrap up the video here because the sun is coming in. It is so warm right now in this room. I need to get some fresh air, just get out of this stuffy room. I'm gonna love you and leave you here, but thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Love you.